You've seen them. Lunch alone, coffee solo, party invites declined. The person at work who never joins the group chat. Your neighbor who waves but never stops to talk. Maybe you are that person. Society calls it antisocial, odd, lonely. But what if the psychology behind a small circle isn't about fear or failure? What if it's about design, about selection so precise it makes a military operation look casual? You've been told bigger is better. More friends, more connections, more networks. But a growing body of research published in 2025 tells a different story. 1,036 adolescents studied at University at Buffalo. 7,889 participants tracked across life stages in the National Institutes of Health Health Study. 402 Canadian students analyzed at multiple universities. The data is screaming something uncomfortable. People with very small circles aren't broken. They're operating on a different frequency, and that frequency might be saving their lives. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the University at Buffalo Department of Psychology, published January 2025 in Behavioral Sciences, and research from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, spanning 4 nationally representative studies with over 14,000 participants tracked across decades. These are peer-reviewed, longitudinal studies with massive sample sizes that people in the field actually cite when they want real data. Now back to the information. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar publishes a paper that changes how we think about friendship. He measures primate brain sizes, 38 different primate genera. The neocortex, the part that handles complex thinking, correlates directly with social group size. Tamarins with a brain ratio of 2.3 maintain groups of 5. Macaques at 3.8 run with 40 members. Dunbar's math predicts humans can handle 150 stable relationships. That's it. 150 people where you know them and they know you, and the relationship has history. Not acquaintances, not followers. Real connections with mutual knowledge and trust. Dunbar's number becomes gospel. Facebook uses it. Military units structure around it. Business consultants build strategies on it. But here's where it fractures. 2021, Swedish researchers at Stockholm University challenged the whole thing. They used Bayesian and generalized least squares methods on larger datasets. Their numbers, 69 to 109. Or 16 to 42, depending on the method. Confidence intervals so wide, 4 to 520, that pinning down one number becomes meaningless. The debate rages. Dunbar fires back in 2025, published in The Conversation. He stands by 150. Telephone networks, Facebook groups, Christmas card lists, military units, Anglo-Saxon villages in the Domesday Book, Bronze Age stone circle communities, all cluster around 150. But even Dunbar admits something crucial. Those 150 break into layers. 5 closest friends or family, your core. 15 good friends you see monthly, 50 you invite to backyard parties. 100, you don't feel weird approaching at 3 a.m. in the Hong Kong airport. And here it is. Some people only operate in that inner 5. They never build outward. Not because they're incapable, because they're selective to a degree that looks extreme. The researchers want to know why introverts who prefer small circles report worse well-being in surveys. On the surface, introversion correlates with loneliness, negative affect, low general well-being. But when they control for aspects of solitude, time spent alone, negative thinking while alone, shyness, affinity for solitude, the picture changes. Introversion alone doesn't predict poor outcomes. The quality of the social relationships matters more than the quantity. They cite work from a 2023 study published in PLOS Mental Health. 402 participants across multiple personality types. Lower social loneliness and higher social support from friends correlates more strongly with happiness for people with low extroversion than those with high extroversion. Translation? Introverts need quality connections more desperately than extroverts do. One bad friendship hits them harder. One betrayal lingers longer. So they prune, they cut, they keep circles microscopic because the cost of maintaining shallow relationships drains them faster than it drains someone wired for breadth. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region handling social monitoring, stays lit during interactions. This creates elevated arousal in your nervous system. For introverts, that baseline arousal is already higher. Their sensory processing sensitivity is cranked up. Think of a glass half full. It takes less input to overflow. Dopamine, norepinephrine, cortisol. These neurotransmitters flood your system during social engagement. Extroverts get an energizing dopamine boost. Introverts get cognitive load. The mental effort to read facial expressions, interpret tone, maintain responses, process information, it stacks. They call it social battery drain, not a medical term, a metaphor. but one grounded in real neurological processes documented in research published by the Anterior Cingulate Cortex Studies from Apps, Rushworth, and Chang in 2016 in the journal Neuron. When your social battery hits 0, your brain is being dramatic. It's protecting itself from overstimulation. A 2020 study on trauma and distrust shows that mental health professionals must establish baseline trust with trauma survivors before those survivors can develop trust in other relationships. Maltreatment doesn't have to be singular. It's the accumulation. Long-term exposure to harmful behaviors. A 2014 study finds people with betrayal trauma perpetrated by close others, are less trusting of romantic partners and others in general, yet everyday trusting behaviors don't appear significantly affected. They can buy coffee. They can work with colleagues, but deep trust, that well is poisoned. They hoard their inner circle like gold because letting someone in means risking the same devastation that broke them before. The more extreme the childhood maltreatment, the more resistant the distrust becomes to positive feedback. You can show them kindness for years, evidence of safety, proof of loyalty, and their brain still keeps the drawbridge up, not stubbornness, survival. The brain learned to associate trust with pain, so it responds with a reflex, a defense mechanism against future emotional distress. This defense becomes problematic when it limits growth, but in the moment, it's rational. It's the brain doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. Protect the organism. Inconsistent parenting creates anxious attachment, fear of abandonment. A study on distrust in romantic relationships finds attachment style directly predicts distrust levels. Distrust predicts jealousy, psychological abuse, snooping behaviors. People with insecure attachments don't just prefer small circles, they need them. A larger network means more variables, more chances for abandonment, more opportunities for betrayal. They keep 3 friends, because managing 3 is survivable. Managing 30? That's exposure they can't afford. And society calls them paranoid, suspicious, unable to trust, when really they're just playing the odds based on data their nervous system collected before they hit puberty. A review of 38 studies released by Frontiers in Psychology finds that having a few high-quality adult friendships significantly predicts well-being and protects against anxiety and depression for a lifetime. Quality over quantity isn't a platitude. It's empirically supported. 2019 research from Psychology Today asks people what they value more, a few close friends or many superficial ones. Americans overwhelmingly prefer a few close, intimate relationships, even in the era of social media influencers, with hundreds of thousands of followers. People know instinctively that numbers don't provide the connection they seek. A meta-analysis shows that having satisfactory relationships, not just many relationships, provides moral support necessary for health benefits. Only satisfactory relationships sustain mutual assistance mechanisms, circulate health-related information, promote healthy behaviors. Unsatisfactory relationships? They drain you, they increase stress, they provide no buffer against life's chaos. So someone who maintains 2 friendships that are deep, reciprocal, trusting, they're statistically better positioned for well-being than someone with 20 acquaintances they see at parties but wouldn't call in a crisis. The United States, according to a 2019 study, places high value on extroversion. Workplaces and schools encourage being sociable and outgoing. It's easier for extroverts to recharge their batteries depending on where they live or work. Introverts account for nearly 50% of the population per 2019 data, half. Yet the systems are built for the other half. Open office plans, group projects, networking events, team building retreats, all designed to energize extroverts and exhaust introverts. An introvert with a small circle enters these spaces and gets labeled antisocial, not a team player, lacking social skills, when in reality they possess the same social skills. They just ration them, they deploy them strategically. Because once that anterior cingulate cortex has been firing for 6 hours in a conference room doing icebreakers, the introvert isn't being rude when they decline the happy hour invite. They're being honest. Their battery is at 4%. They need solitude, like a diabetic needs insulin. It's not optional. They remember details. They invest time in understanding the inner lives of the people they let in. Self-sufficiency. They enjoy their own company. This isn't loneliness, it's comfort with solitude. They bring a well-nurtured self to relationships, which makes those relationships richer. Authenticity. They value genuine, honest interactions. In a crowd of people putting on facades, they gravitate toward the one person being real. That person stands out because they're not performing. Empathy. They listen deeply. When someone speaks, they process not just words, but emotion, context, subtext. This activates oxytocin release, the bonding hormone. It builds stronger, closer relationships, unconditional support, They stand by their people in highs and lows. True friendship to them isn't shared laughter alone. It's presence during rough patches, high self-esteem. People with many friends don't necessarily have higher self-esteem. Research suggests otherwise. Having fewer friends reflects a conscious decision to surround yourself with people who truly appreciate and understand you. This choice reflects a strong sense of self-worth and confidence in your own worthiness of respect and affection. People with high self-esteem are selective because they recognize their value and refuse to settle for relationships that don't provide mutual respect and understanding. The quality versus quantity debate has teeth when you look at health outcomes. 2 decades of research documented by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences shows causal associations between social relationships and mortality. Lack of social connections increases odds of death by at least 50%. When multidimensional assessments are considered, odds of mortality increase by 91% among the socially isolated. The magnitude of this effect compares to smoking. It exceeds obesity and physical inactivity. But here's the nuance. It's not the number of connections, it's the nature of them. A 2011 study from Italy using nationally representative data tests, whether quantity or quality of social interactions, predicts self-reported health. Frequency of meetings with friends correlates positively with good health in all regressions, but when they add satisfaction with relationships with friends, a quality measure, to the equations, the statistical significance of quantitative measures scales down. Satisfaction with friendships exhibits a positive and highly significant coefficient. Quality wins. Loneliness is more closely related to perceived quality than quantity of social relationships. People can live rather solitary lives and not feel lonely, or they can have many social relationships and nevertheless feel lonely. Perceptions matter. The painful feeling of social isolation accompanies perceived deficiencies in the number or quality of relationships. Someone with 3 deep friendships who feels understood and valued, not lonely. Someone with 50 acquaintances who feels misunderstood and unseen, crushing loneliness. A 2022 study published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences introduces relational diversity, the richness and evenness of relationship types across social interactions. Using data from over 60,000 users of a French mobile app tracking psychological experiences, they find that diversity in relationship types predicts well-being. But even here, it's not just about having more types of people, it's about meaningful interactions across those types. Introverts with small circles might have fewer relationship types, but deeper investment in each type they do maintain. A meta-analysis involving over 3 million participants published in research on longevity and social connection shows social isolation links to a 29% increase in mortality risk. Loneliness contributes to a 26% rise. Living alone associates with a 32% higher risk of death. Effects of objective and subjective social isolation compare to major health risks like smoking and obesity. Alarmingly, younger adults under 65 experience even greater mortality risk associated with social deficits compared to older adults. But dig deeper. The Lancet. Healthy Longevity publishes a 2024 study on end-of-life outcomes across 19 countries. They examine structure, function, and quality components of social connection in older people's last years. Quality components, like loneliness and satisfaction with relationships, matter more than structural components like network size, as people approach death. Older adults with smaller networks but higher quality relationships report greater satisfaction and positive emotional experiences. They exhibit enhanced conflict management and emotional regulation. They prioritize meaningful connections over superficial ones. Socio-emotional selectivity theory explains this. As people perceive time as limited, emotional goals assume primacy over knowledge-related goals. They prune their networks. They eliminate peripheral contacts. They keep only the relationships that matter most, and their mental health often improves. If you value documented psychological research like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This information comes from research published in The Lancet Healthy Longevity in March 2024, analyzing data from the Survey of Health, Aging, and Retirement in Europe, the largest European cohort study with participants across 18 countries and Israel. We also reference the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences study published January 2016, using 4 nationally representative NIH-funded studies covering 7,889 ad health participants, 863 MIDAS respondents, 4,000, 323 HRS participants, and 1,571 NSAP participants tracked longitudinally. This is longitudinal population-based contemporary data with biomarker measurements and high-quality social relationship assessments. Now back to the information. The Nurses' Health Study tracked 72,322 women from 1992 through 2014. Average age, 58.8 years at baseline. They used the Berkman-Symes Social Network Index to measure social integration. Results published November 2020 show socially integrated versus isolated women had 10% longer lifespan and 41% higher odds of surviving to age 85. These findings remained significant after adjusting for health behaviors and depression. Social integration predicts exceptional longevity. But what constitutes social integration? Not necessarily large networks. The studies measure marital status, frequency of contact with network members, memberships in religious or social institutions. Someone married with regular contact with 5 close friends and involvement in one organization. Socially integrated, someone single with irregular contact across 30 acquaintances and no organizational involvement. Socially isolated. The number of friends matters less than the consistency and quality of engagement. It describes sustained investment in social relationships that are mutual and trusting. Higher scores predict significantly less increase in functional limitations over time, and reduced probability of onset of functional limitations between waves. Mortality is significantly lower in those with higher positive relations with others. All associations are robust even when controlling for social integration and social support. Positive relations with others operates independently. It's not just about having people around. It's about the depth and mutuality and trust within those relationships. Someone with 2 friends who score high on positive relations with others is statistically better positioned for longevity than someone with 10 friends who score low. Social relationships get under the skin to affect physiological well-being. During social interactions, your brain activates stress response systems. Cortisol levels fluctuate. Inflammatory markers change. For people with high-quality relationships, these biological responses are buffered. Emotional support provided by social ties enhances psychological well-being, which reduces risk of unhealthy behaviors and poor physical health. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, your stress response system, functions better. Immune endocrine and cardiovascular functions benefit. Allostatic load, the wear and tear on your body from chronically overworked physiological systems, decreases. These processes unfold across the entire life course with effects on health. Emotionally supportive childhood environments promote healthy development of regulatory systems, including immune, metabolic, and autonomic nervous systems with long-term consequences for adult health. But unsupportive or toxic relationships, they do the opposite. They increase cortisol. They elevate inflammatory markers. They accelerate physiological dysregulation. Someone maintaining 10 shallow friendships with frequent conflict and low trust, their body is under chronic stress. Someone maintaining 3 deep friendships with high support and low conflict, their body is in homeostasis. The small circle isn't limiting them, it's protecting them. But at the individual level, aging associates with fewer peripheral contacts who matter least to happiness, and more frequent interactions with core friends and family. Relationship quality improves with age, possibly because people prune social networks such that only the most meaningful are retained. Across generations, overall social connections appear to decline. People are less socially engaged today than in the past, measured by conventional pre-social media modes of interactions. But remember, social engagement is multifaceted, not single dimension. Someone with 5 close friends who they see weekly and text daily might be more socially engaged than someone with 40 friends they see at annual events, and occasionally like on Instagram. Frequency of interaction matters, depth matters, reciprocity matters. The metrics we use to measure social health are still catching up to the reality of how people actually connect. Pistanthrophobia, fear of trusting others in love or friendship, comes from emotional trauma, betrayal, or lack of trust. The term derives from Greek, pistuo, meaning to trust, phobos, meaning fear, an irrational behavior of trusting nobody. The condition has cautious levels. It focuses on pathological fear of building trust and inability to connect intimately and emotionally. The mind learns to associate trust with pain and suffering. The brain responds as reflex, defense mechanism, against future emotional distress. When this defense becomes problematic, it limits and hinders growth. The fear response triggers intensely in the brain. The individual perceives the mental boundary as unbreakable. These people tend to be quiet and isolated. They may view everyone as potential betrayers. Even fundamental relationships suffer. Children with pistanthrophobia tend to be lonely and depressed. They resist social engagement not from preference, but from terror. This is the strategic selectivity of a healthy small circle. This is paralysis. This is the difference between choosing solitude and being imprisoned by it. They may feel at ease around others, but have less capacity to spend extended periods with them. A 2006 study of college students finds low self-esteem is a strong predictor of social anxiety, but introversion is less important. If people often feel inadequate or experience frequent stress over what others think, that signals social anxiety, not introversion. Someone declining a party because they need to recharge? Introvert. Someone declining a party because they fear judgment, humiliation, or rejection? Social anxiety. The distinction matters because the interventions differ. Introverts need strategies for energy management and boundary setting. People with social anxiety need cognitive behavioral therapy to reframe distorted thoughts and gradually increase exposure to feared situations. Conflating the two does disservice to both. They invest deeply in few relationships and experience the documented benefits: lower mortality risk, better functional capacity, higher life satisfaction, stronger emotional regulation. They prune ruthlessly not from fear but from optimization. They treat relationships like a portfolio manager treats assets. Cut the underperformers. Reallocate resources to the winners. The result is a concentrated, high-performing network that delivers returns. Other people chase with networks 10 times the size. On the other end, trauma survivors. Trust is shattered. The small circle isn't preference, it's fortress. Letting someone in means risking devastation, so they keep walls high and circles microscopic. Not because it's optimal, because it's the only way they feel safe. The intervention here is therapeutic, processing trauma, rebuilding trust capacity, gradually expanding social engagement when and if the person feels ready. In the middle, the typical introverts. Biology dealt them high sensory processing sensitivity and a finite social battery. They navigate a world built for extroverts. They decline invitations not to be rude, but to preserve function. They invest in quality because quantity exhausts them. They experience the same need for connection as anyone else. They just meet that need differently. And the research increasingly shows they're not doing it wrong. They're doing it their way, and their way works. We treat large social circles as status symbols and small circles as deficiencies, but the data says otherwise. A study from MIDAS, the National Longitudinal Midlife in the United States Survey, finds that positive relations with others predicts reduced mortality independent of network size. Meaning you can have 5 friends or 50. If those relationships are mutual, trusting, and emotionally supportive, you get the longevity benefit. If they're shallow, transactional, and conflict-ridden, network size becomes irrelevant or even harmful. Another study from Italy shows that satisfaction with friendships predicts health better than frequency of social contact. You can see someone weekly and feel unsatisfied. You can see someone monthly and feel deeply connected. The calendar does determine relationship quality. The nature of the interaction does. We need new metrics, new language, new cultural scripts that validate small circles when they're chosen consciously and maintained healthfully. They draw energy from both social settings and solitude. Their social battery needs fluctuate based on context. They might attend a conference and feel energized, then come home and need 3 days of silence. Traditional frameworks struggle to capture their experience. They get misread as extroverts when they're social, then accused of flaking when they need isolation. But they're not inconsistent. They're responsive to their own internal states. Some ambiverts maintain small circles during certain life phases, graduate school, new parenthood, career transitions, and expand during others. They're modeling something important. Social needs aren't fixed. They change based on life stage, stress levels, available energy, competing demands. Rigidity in either direction, always expanding or always contracting, misses the dynamic nature of human connection. The healthiest approach might be flexibility, small circle when you need depth and protection, larger network when you have capacity for breadth and opportunity, but always quality over quantity, always mutual trust and support over superficial numbers. They already operated with small circles and high comfort with solitude. For extroverts, the isolation was devastating. Their energy source was cut off, mental health declined. But research from this period also shows something else. When people were forced to prioritize a small number of relationships, relationship quality often improved. With fewer options, people invested more deeply in the connections they maintained. Video calls with parents became weekly rituals. Texting with close friends intensified. The peripheral acquaintances fell away, and people didn't miss them as much as expected. A 2023 study in Health Psychology Open finds that people who were highly introverted and believed they wouldn't benefit from socializing reported higher levels of happiness after social connections than those who considered themselves highly extroverted. Introverts experience positive effects from engagement even when they don't predict they will, but they need the right engagement. Small group or one-on-one interactions that allow depth, not crowded parties with surface-level chat. Give an introvert the right conditions and they socialize successfully. Force them into conditions that drain them and they shut down. The issue is their capacity. It's the mismatch between their needs and the environment. 2024. Research from University of Central Florida examining friendship intimacy finds that introversion negatively correlates with emotional self-disclosure at negative 0.23 significance level. Introverts disclose less. But when they do disclose to their small circle, the intimacy is higher. They're selective about vulnerability. They don't share with everyone. They share with the people who earned it. This selectivity protects them from overexposure and repeated betrayal. But it also means building trust takes longer. The people in their small circle waited. They proved consistency. They demonstrated safety. And once admitted, they stay. Loyalty is high in small circles. Churn is low. Extroverts might cycle through friendships more frequently. Different people for different activities. Introverts keep their 5 people for years or decades. The friendships deepen over time, becoming irreplaceable. Ask someone with a small circle to name their closest friend, and they answer in under a second. Ask someone with a large network and they hesitate. Too many options. Too little differentiation. The small circle knows exactly who matters. The clarity is liberating. Research shows that younger adults under 65 experience greater mortality risk from social isolation than older adults. This seems counterintuitive. Younger people are healthier. They should have more buffer. But social isolation in young adulthood disrupts developmental processes. Your 20s and 30s are when you typically build career foundations, romantic partnerships, and social identities. If you're isolated during those years, the cascading effects are severe. You miss networking opportunities that lead to jobs. You miss social learning about relationship skills. You miss the identity formation that comes from seeing yourself reflected in others' eyes. By the time you reach older adulthood, the accumulated disadvantage is massive. Older adults can compensate for smaller networks through depth and quality. Younger adults need some breadth for opportunity and development. This doesn't mean young people with small circles are doomed, but it does mean they need to ensure their small circle provides what they need: mentorship, career guidance, emotional support, social learning. If their 3 friends are all in similar positions with similar limitations, they're more vulnerable than if their 3 friends offer diverse perspectives and resources. Strategic diversity within a small circle matters. Social media promise to overcome the limitations of geography and time. You could maintain hundreds of friendships through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but research shows this isn't how it works. A 2016 survey by Dunbar himself finds over 50% of Facebook users have more than 200 friends. Average Twitter followers is 707. Following a new account does push out memory of another, but do these count as relationships? Dunbar says no. The quality is low, often one-sided, especially with celebrities or influencers. These aren't people who know you and you know them with mutual history. They're parasocial relationships. They provide the feeling of connection without the substance. Studies find that social media users who consume greater levels of content report reduced social capital and increased loneliness. A 2014 study using experience sampling texts participants 5 times per day for 2 weeks. The more they used Facebook, the worse they felt next time they were messaged. More Facebook use over 2 weeks correlated with declining life satisfaction. Interacting with people face-to-face did not predict these negative outcomes. Digital connection fails to replace physical presence. It might supplement. It might maintain relationships between in-person contacts, but it doesn't substitute. Someone with 5 friends they see in person weekly is socially healthier than someone with 500 Facebook friends they never see. The medium matters. The depth matters. The reciprocity matters. Numbers on a screen aren't community. The acquaintances who want your time but don't give emotional support. The networks you maintain because you think you should. Cut them. Prune ruthlessly. Identify the 5 to 15 people who actually matter. Who you'd call in a crisis. Who call you in theirs. Who you can be yourself around without performance or pretense. Invest everything there. Deep investment, regular contact, vulnerability, support, and watch what happens. Your stress decreases, your satisfaction increases, your mortality risk drops, your functional capacity improves. The research across every major longitudinal study for the past 30 years says quality over quantity is just a nice idea. It's survival, it's longevity. It's the difference between dying at 75, isolated and bitter, or dying at 90, surrounded by people who actually know you. People with small circles figured this out, either through instinct or necessity or trauma or preference. They stopped chasing breadth and started cultivating depth. And the science increasingly shows they were right. Research published in 2023 from Midas on positive relations with others finds one more thing. The associations between positive relations and health outcomes are independent of social integration and social support. meaning even when researchers control for whether someone is married, frequency of contact, and perceived support, positive relations still predicts mortality and functional limitations. This is its own thing. Sustained investment in relationships that are mutual and trusting. You can't fake it. You can't check a box and get the benefit. You have to actually build relationships where both people are invested, where trust is real, where mutuality exists. This takes time. It takes vulnerability. It takes consistent effort. Most people don't want to do that work for 50 friendships. They barely want to do it for 5, but doing it for 5? That's manageable, that's sustainable, and that's what saves you in the end. The Stockholm Challenge to Dunbar's number, the Midos findings on positive relations, the Italian data on satisfaction versus frequency, the Chicago study on loneliness and quality, the meta-analysis on social isolation and mortality, the Lancet research on end-of-life social connection across 19 countries, all pointing the same direction. Small circles, when they're healthy and chosen, aren't deficiency. They're optimization, they're precision. They're people who understand their own wiring and design their social lives accordingly. And in a world that screams more, they whisper enough. They know what enough looks like. 3 friends who understand them completely. 5 family members they trust without question. 2 colleagues who have their back. That's the circle. That's the fortress. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. Social researchers do something similar. They track people across decades. They measure relationships. They document how people lived. And in those massive data sets across 14,000 participants over 30 years, they find the bodies, the isolated ones, the ones who died early, the ones whose health collapsed at 60, the ones who lost function at 70, and they ask why. What separated survivors from casualties? Not income, though that matters. Not education, though that helps. The strongest predictor across studies is social connection. But again, not the number of connections, the quality, the mutuality, the trust, the people who made it to 90 with their minds intact and their bodies functional. They had small circles of deep relationships. The ones who died at 75, isolated and declining. They had large networks of shallow connections. The data is cold, the data is brutal, but the data is consistent. Quality over quantity isn't philosophy, it's biology, it's mortality. It's the thing that determines whether you see your grandkids or die alone in a nursing home scrolling through Facebook friends who forgot your name. Maybe declining the party invite isn't antisocial. Maybe it's prioritizing the relationship that needs tending at home. Maybe having 5 friends instead of 50 isn't a failure to connect. Maybe it's a refusal to settle for anything less than real. The psychology of people who keep very small circles is the psychology of people who know what they need and have the courage to ignore what everyone else says they should want. The research finally caught up to what they always knew. Small circle, deep roots, long life, that's the pattern. That's the finding. That's what survives when everything else falls away.